Welcome. On behalf of the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, we welcome you to the University of Wisconsin-Marathon County and to the UW Center for Civic Engagement for tonight's special forum featuring retired Congressman David Obey and currently sitting Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. My name is Eric Giordano, and I am an associate professor of political science here at UW-Marathon County and the interim director of the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service. For nearly 40 years, through the Better Way Club, Congressman Obey brought national leaders to the 7th Congressional District for an evening of conversation on vital issues of the day. Proceeds from that event, as many of you know, went to help fund the Congressman's many successful campaigns. With the campaigns at an end for Congressman Obey, many people mentioned that they would like to see this series continue. And so, thanks to Congressman Obey, he agreed to have this series continued under the auspices of the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service with a very specific purpose, and that purpose is to raise funds for the education of college freshmen and sophomores here in this district, and in particular to help us launch a new student civic leadership program. We're very grateful for this, Congressman Obey, and for allowing us to appropriate the name Better Way Club. Now we're calling it the New Better Way Club. And I want to state for the record that we will now accept checks from both Republicans and Democrats. Actually, I'm sure you would have accepted checks from Republicans. They maybe just didn't get any. Tonight's forum would not be possible without the hard work of WIP's staff, with particular thanks to Connie Nicolai and Ian Reese. We're also grateful for the support of Chris Berg, for our theater technician, Chris McCaslin, who's our campus events and scheduling coordinator, Judy Witkoff, our public relations director, our marvelous WIPS interns and student government association leaders and other student leaders who are here with us. And special thanks to Jan Kelton, Congressman Obey's personal assistant, who was a major part of getting this thing organized, as well as Mara Cicenti, who is Congresswoman DeLauro's personal assistant. So we thank all of those people. At this time, we'd also like to recognize a few dignitaries that we've seen in the audience and ask them to stand briefly after I call your name. I hope I don't miss anyone, but first we'd like to recognize and give thanks to UW-Marathon County Campus Dean Keith Montgomery. Keith, are you here? Thank you. WIP's board members, Chris Bremer-Mugley, Linda Ware, and UW System Regent Mark Bradley. Thank you for being here. And Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Ann Walsh Bradley. Thank you for being here. And I believe I saw Senator Kreitlow, who is also running against Sean Duffy in the 7th Congressional District. Okay, if I've forgotten anyone, come and see me. We'll give you a refund. But we really also want to thank all of you for being here, because we know that you're here to support, obviously, Congressman Obey and his legacy and causes that you believe in, but also hopefully a part of that support is for the education component of the Wisconsin Institute and our campus. And so we are very grateful for all of you being here tonight, and we do intend to continue this as an annual event, and we hope you will come back. Finally, I wish to have recognized by standing up all of our UW-Marathon County students so that we can understand who the faces are of the people we're here to support tonight. Would you mind standing, all students who are here, please? Thank you. Tonight's event is designed to raise funds for them and for future students like them to help develop leadership skills and appreciation for civics and policy making and government processes, areas that nearly every recent national poll shows American youth lagging in terms of both their knowledge, understanding, and participation. Now, tonight's presentation was originally billed as a public conversation about education in America, but I have to say that that's a bit of false advertising, because really with us tonight we have two of the nation's experts on the United States budget, finances, and programs that transcend education and pretty much affect every major part of life in America. And I think a more appropriate title, therefore, might be Ground Zero of Our Nation's Budget Battles. So we'll have to see how they respond to that particular title. Our presentation will begin with introductory remarks by Congressman David Obey, followed by a talk from Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. Following her remarks, we will be pleased to have a question and answer session with our featured guests. Students will be circulating throughout the theater with microphones. If you want to ask a question, please just raise your hand. We'll end the forum promptly at 7:30, after which we'll encourage you to join us for dessert and drinks in the foyer and lobby area. And we just ask that you accord our guests and each other the courtesy and respect that you all deserve and expect from a public forum in which we practice civil dialogue. At this time, please make sure that all your electronic devices are silenced. David Obey grew up in Wausau, Wisconsin, graduating from Wausau East High School. He attended the University of Wisconsin-Marathon County, where he learned everything he needed to know, and matriculated to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, receiving a Bachelor of Arts and later a master's degree in Soviet politics. Congressman Obey was elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly in 1963 and served until his election in the U.S. House of Representatives from Wisconsin's 7th District in 1969. Serving until 2011, he remains the longest-serving congressman in Wisconsin history. Among many accomplishments, he chaired the commission that wrote the House's Code of Ethics, served on the House Budget Committee, chaired the Joint Economic Committee, and was a long-serving member and then chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. His political priorities included strengthening federal investment in education, expanding access to affordable health care, affordable tax cuts fairly distributed to all taxpayers, agricultural policy and help for family farmers, environmental protection, and bipartisan support for efforts to secure the homeland, especially measures that protect today our borders, ports, transportation systems, food supply, public health, and interagency law enforcement communications. He is the author of a 2007 book, Raising Hell for Justice, The Battles of a Heartland Progressive, published by the University of Wisconsin Press, a title which aptly reflects how he has lived his life and served his country. Finally, some here may not know this, and so this might be news to some of you, but his most recent accomplishment has been the naming of David Obey as a senior fellow of the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service. Welcome, senior fellow David Obey.
Thank you all for coming. It's really good to see you, and I'm especially appreciative of the fact that you're helping us to get this transitional event off the ground. As Eric indicated, I owe one heck of a lot to this institution. I began my college education right across the street back when this institution was a whole lot smaller than it is today. And that was back in the days when Jerry Madison was going to that giant institution down at Stevens Point. But I never forgot what I learned here, and I really do believe that I had some of the best teaching that I had in my entire life right here at this institution. And what we want to do in these coming years is, with the Better Way Club, for instance, is to transfer its focus from what used to be campaigning to helping develop student leadership so that we can prepare the next generation so that they will make the same mistakes tonight that I did when I was in the Congress for more than a few years. And I appreciate the work that the staff has done here in making this possible. Before I get into what I want to talk about, I want to take a couple of minutes on a sidetrack mission. How many of you here wish that Dave Zine were still in the state Senate? The fact that he isn't is because this guy, Pat Kreitlow, took him out 4 years ago. A great public service, and I cannot tell you, I am very pleased that Pat has announced that, I don't know if you're aware of it, but Pat is the first candidate in the United States to announce his run for re-election after the Ryan bill passed the Congress last week. A lot of people were trying to get Pat to run, and the last straw in making him decide to run was the vicious nature of that Ryan package. And I'm glad that we're going to have somebody on the campaign trail pointing out the savage nature of that package. And what I want to talk about tonight is I want to devote a little time talking about Mr. Ryan, a little time talking about Mr. Walker, and then introduce our guest this evening who can expand on both subjects. As you know, Wisconsin's had a special place in Wisconsin, or in American history. In the 19th century, the state was owned lock, stock, and barrel by the timber interests, the mining interests, and other big business forces. Then a guy by the name of Bob La Follette turned politics right side up and put people back in charge of the political system in this state. And that is why it is especially jarring to me to see that this incredible assault on the basic moral foundation of democracy and this assault on the core of enlightened capitalism is coming from two Wisconsin politicians today. One being Congressman Ryan from the southeastern part of the state, and the other being Governor Walker. And I want to start by making a couple of comments about Ryan. Ryan has produced a package which is savagely negative toward education, especially higher education. He has also virtually in his package eliminated Medicare as we know it. And he is also doing the same thing on Medicaid. People sell Medicare, or at least the conservative Republicans often sell Medicaid as being, oh, it's just a poor people's program. It doesn't have much to do with the middle class. I would point out there are an awful lot of middle class people who use Medicaid in order to pay the bills in nursing homes for Granny and Gramps. And the fact is that what Ryan does to Medicaid is to push us back to where we were in the 50s. And where we were then is that if Granny had a stroke, what did families do? They added another room to the house. They converted a room in the house for Granny, and they took care of her as best they could. Ryan would shove us back to those good old days of the 50s. The main difference is that today ain't nobody home to take care of Granny in most instances because so many households have both mother and father working outside the home. And so if something happens to the grandparents, you have a devil of a time finding a way to get them taken care of without Medicaid. And that's what Ryan does. And Ryan has got a lot of people in the pundit class fooled because they are swooning with delight that somehow Ryan is taking on the economic excesses of the country and that somehow he's going to bring us to an era of fiscal responsibility. But the fact is, what Ryan does is it's a new version of the hidden ball trick. Ryan doesn't use that money to balance the budget. Ryan uses the savings that government achieves. He shifts those costs. He doesn't eliminate them. He shifts those costs to private families. And then what he really does is use a whole lot of that money to cut taxes for the most well-off people in this country. And that comes in the context of economic policy that over the last 30 years have moved a tremendous amount of resources up the income scale to the point where today the wealthiest 20% control over 80% of the nation's wealth. And when you see that since roughly from the Reagan era to 2004, you see that 43% of all of the income growth in the country has gone to the top 1% of people in the country. That's the context in which Ryan produces his bill. And he is aided and abetted in that by what Governor Walker is doing in this state. And what Walker does is essentially to engage in an assault on local government and on the independence of local government. Ryan also attacks state aid to local governments and to education. And he also rips up the ability of average working people to have any say whatsoever in how they're treated in the workplace or at the bargaining table. And this is no accident. Now, Ryan says he has no choice, that the budget situation is, Walker says he has no choice, that the budget situation is so bad that he's got to make all of those cuts. Well, I think there is another way. I asked the Legislative Fiscal Bureau a few weeks ago if they would tell me how income tax rates in this state have changed since the day that I left the Wisconsin legislature on April 1st of 1969. And what they told me is that the bottom income tax bracket, the rate for people in that bracket has gone up by 70% since that time. And the tax rate for people in the top bracket, those above $210,000, have dropped by 22%. If all Ryan did was to take that top tax bracket and put it back to where it was in 1969, he would raise $600 million. He would cut in half the hit that they're laying on education. But this Ryan won't do that because this isn't about dollars. This is about something very different. I mean, the fact is that what they want to do is change the whole attitude of this country. What they want, they do not like the fact that a lot of us believe that there ought to be a reasonable balance between individual responsibility and social responsibility. And so they produce a vision which is totally devoid of any attention to social responsibility or our responsibilities to one another. And so what are they doing? Before FDR, the federal government really did two things. It helped finance the westward expansion of the country, and it helped provide assistance to big business. Then FDR came along during the Great Depression and decided you ought to cut average families in on the deal. And he passed a number of initiatives which helped to gradually expand the working family share of the economic pie in this country. And for years, you saw that work. And gradually you saw the gap between rich and middle class, rich and everybody else, shrink considerably. Then Eisenhower got elected, and the right wing was hoping that they could wipe out the New Deal and return to the good old days. But Eisenhower said, no, we're not going to do that. And so they were disappointed, and they sort of went back into their sulk and started producing some conservative position papers out of some of these think tanks that try to change people's attitudes about what government ought to be doing. And then Goldwater, with Goldwater's nomination, they took over the party in '64 and got beat. And then they really went to work and poured a lot of money into these think tanks, the Bradley Foundation, the Scafee Foundation, the Koch brothers, you name it. And they and they produced a whole series of reports trying to convince people that we really ought to eliminate the last 2/3 of the 20th century. And now, with the election of a large number of hard-right types to the House of Representatives, they think they finally have their shot. And so they're taking a shot. They want to reverse the fact that for 30 years we were expanding the opportunity for people in the middle class to get a better deal. And they want to nail down the reverse trend that we've had since since the Reagan era. They want to nail down their ability to gradually reverse that flow of income back up the income scale. And at the same time, what they want to do is, through a combination of Supreme Court decisions such as Citizens United, plus their attack on organized labor and their right to organize, what they're trying to do is to destroy the ability of progressives in this country to stop anything that they want to do. And so that is really what's at stake. And there is going to be a huge fight in this state, and there's going to be a huge fight in the Congress over that issue. And at the center of that fight in Washington is the Appropriations Subcommittee on Education, Labor, Health, and Social Services. As you know, I either was the ranking minority member on that subcommittee for many, many years, or I was the chairman. And now that I'm out of the picture, my successor in that job is the woman who's sitting here tonight. I've known Rosa for the 21 years that she served in the Congress. I wouldn't have been elected Appropriations Chairman in the first place if it weren't for the actions of some of these crazy women in Congress, like Rosa and Nancy Pelosi and Nita Lowey and some others, along with some of the younger members of the place. And today, well, Rosa spent a number of years. You understand Connecticut is a very big agricultural state. And so, but Rosa spent a number of years as the chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture and did a superb job on that. And now she chairs the Labor, Health, Education, Social Services Subcommittee. And she also happens to serve as the co-chair of the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, which means that she and George Miller are the two principal hands that Nancy Pelosi uses to try to protect progressive instincts in our caucus and in the country. She is absolutely my favorite member of the House of Representatives. And before she was in the Congress, she served as staff chief to Senator Chris Dodd. And she also served as director of Emily's List, which spent a lot of time trying to elect women to Congress in the first place. So I'm awfully happy to have her with me tonight. And Rosa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. No one will ever succeed David Obey in the Congress. I mean that very, very sincerely. So it really is wonderful to be here with you. And David, thank you so much for the invitation to do this. And Pat, just let us know how we can help you. I'm sure you'll give us a call, and but we want you there. And so we're very excited that you've taken this on. Let me just say, I have to say, first of all, I'm coming into this room, David, it's like a family. So the banter, people back and forth, and folks knowing each other for years is so wonderful. And I want to just say a thank you to all of you for welcoming me into this family. And I've got my short history of Wisconsin. at the outset of this effort. But David Obey has been a real friend to me. I have to say some things about him. He's been a mentor, and he has been a confidant. As a matter of fact, one of the students asked me about the committee, getting onto the committee of appropriations, and it was David in 1992 who said to me, "You ought to try to be on the appropriations committee." He says, "I think you'd do a good job there." And then I went out and tried to collect the votes, and I was delighted to be able to serve on the committee, and still am. I don't have to tell you, as I say, this is a family. I watched the banter amongst you, what a fighting progressive David Obey is. He is incorruptible and always unapologetic about telling the truth and doing the impossible. And he does not suffer fools, as I think you probably all know. He taught me a lot about the way of Washington, how it works, and his fierce advocacy for working families has always been an inspiration for me. He enjoys such tremendous respect and enormous respect from Democrats, and we miss him. I personally miss him, his values, his integrity, and his tenacity. Eric mentioned some of the areas, and he has made such a difference in so many areas of consequence, a leader in educational opportunity for everyone, infant care, WIC, child nutrition, literacy programs, Title I, school reform. He provided, and I met Mel, Mel is in there someplace here, but David did the largest increase in veterans' health funding in the history of the Veterans Administration. He developed the low-income energy assistance program, LIHEAP, the home heating program, so important to low-income seniors, and so important to my state of Connecticut and your state of Wisconsin. His support of UNICEF on the Foreign Operations Subcommittee helped to save millions of children's lives around the world. And he was instrumental in our fight to pass comprehensive health care reform. And it only made sense, my friends, that when that final bill passed, Chairman Obey was presiding in the House of Representatives. A great moment, a great moment. And I am proud and humbled, really, to follow in his footsteps as the ranking member on the Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education Committee. That was my first choice for committees when I got to be on the Appropriations Committee, and I feel like I have come full circle. And just very briefly, a vignette, you have to bid for the position of subcommittee. Once you get on to the committee, and we're in the room, and the board is up with all the committees and all the vacancies, and you go starting in seniority as to what you want to do, what committee you want to be on. And at that juncture, I was at the end of the line. And there was, when it was getting to my turn, there was one slot left on Labor Age. And the colleague who had seniority above me was a gentleman named Joe Serrano from New York. And Joe we're very similar in where our values and our philosophies are. I said, oh God, it's gone. He's going to take that slot. And Lord was watching out for me that day. He took something else, and I wound up on Labor HHS. So indeed, it's for me like coming full circle. So I want to just tell you how wonderful it is for me to be here today. It's the first time I've been to Wisconsin. And it's a state that's such a rich history, a cradle of progressivism. And David started to mention it, the home and the stomping grounds of the Fighting La Follettes, Robert Sr., Jr., who began a proud tradition of fighting for working people that David is the heir to. And it was here in Wisconsin that influential thinkers like John Commons, Charles Van Hise laid the intellectual groundwork for progressivism at the national level. And before there was a New Deal or a Great Society, there was the Wisconsin idea. It started here, and it is still happening right here, right now. And that's why I want to say thank you to our host today, the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, not just for having us here today, but for the dedication, the continued dedication to the Wisconsin idea that universities should be incubators, for sound public policy, that they can help to enrich our community, they can have an impact on the public discourse, and they can improve the way that our government works. And I thank you for that commitment, and I thank David, when he was head of the Democratic Study Group in the House, for being committed to powerful ideas, for doing so much to promote civic service, active citizenship, including the event that's being held this evening, the Student Civic Leadership Program, that you will all work to benefit. We need your input now, more than ever. Right now, in the streets and the voting booths of Wisconsin, we are witnessing a fundamental philosophical divide about the role of government. In the face of Governor Walker's recent attempts to deny working people their basic right to bargain collectively, Wisconsin has led the way in saying, no, not on our watch. And it's been heartening to witness Wisconsin's men and women standing up and standing together against this assault. They've been powerful, fighting powerful interests for the sake of workers' basic rights. And make no mistake, this is a well-planned and a concerted assault that we are witnessing. And I believe we are at the crossroads in America right now. We have to make a decision about what type of a country we want to be. The Republicans know what they want. And here in Wisconsin, in states like Ohio and Indiana and in Washington too, they are operating from the same vision and from the same playbook. In my view, they are not making a serious attempt to restore or to create jobs, to restore economic growth, and address budget deficits. Rather, they are trying to accelerate a race to the bottom by rushing to accommodate the interests of the rich and the powerful. It is a way of doing business which tells workers in this country, you do not matter. Your right to a decent wage does not matter. Your dreams and your aspirations to do better and to be able to provide for your family do not matter. You know, in the past, strong communities and stable employment in combination with strong labor and employer-based benefits meant that you would probably be all right, even in times of downturn. Today, we even have to fight bitterly to extend unemployment benefits. In the past, strong growth would follow most downturns, and its benefits would reach huge swaths of Americans, making it possible for more and more families to join the middle class. But today we see an anemic growth that is leaving behind more than 14 million unemployed Americans. And as we try and pull our way out of a deep recession, it is no coincidence that as membership in unions has fallen, income inequality has risen steadily to the point where 1% of people now make 23% of the income in America. This is because middle-class workers have been squeezed, their wages have stagnated, their benefits have been cut, their job security has been weakened, and their wage and hour protections have been violated. All of this is a result of misguided Republican trickle-down policies that never do trickle down. You can see it here in Governor Walker's budget. You can see it in Washington with the budget battles that we have been experiencing. You know, governing is about choices, and you can tell everything you need to know about the priorities of the new proposals that the majority has made and where their choices lie. H.R. 1, their original proposal for the 2011 budget, was basically an ideological document. While preserving oil subsidies and tax breaks for corporations, It tried to roll back health care reform, kill Title X, defund the EPA, slash Head Start, Title I, Pell Grants, special education, the TRIO program, the Gear Up program, AmeriCorps and community service, medical research, community health centers, and gut the social safety net. The continuing resolution for 2011 that was passed eliminated all of the literacy programs for children in the United States of America. At the same time, we are spending millions of dollars to teach literacy to youngsters and especially little girls in Afghanistan, which we should do, but not eliminate literacy programs in America. We managed to fight back against a lot of the worst aspects of the bill. And I will tell you that 40% of the cuts in that H.R. 1 came in labor, health, education, and human services. We fought back the worst aspects, but the Republicans are at it again. They recently voted to approve a budget blueprint crafted by another son of Wisconsin, Congressman Paul Ryan. This is a man, let us remember, who was able to get a college education thanks to the Social Security survivor benefits his family received when his father died tragically of a heart attack. That's why those benefits are there. And a man who, when George W. Bush came into office, inheriting a budget surplus, actually worried aloud that the national debt was too small. The choices they have made in that proposal are staggering. Congressman Ryan described it. He said, this is not a budget, it is a cause. And it's a cause I think we can't afford to support. Instead of working to reduce the deficit in a common sense way, they have chosen, as David pointed out, to end Medicare. Their budget converts a program that has ensured that all seniors can get the health care they need for almost 50 years into a voucher program, and then thereby throwing seniors to the wolves. My mother is 97 years old. She relies on Medicare. Now, give my mother a voucher, sure, I'm there. I can help her with her insurance. But how many others are just on their own and don't know what to do? That's essentially what will happen. This is not hyperbole. It's not rhetoric. It's the fact. They end Medicare. We already know the vouchers will not be adequate. The average voucher in 2022, the first year of the Ryan voucher plan, would be $8,000, already $12,000 below the estimated cost of health care. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office has estimated a typical 65-year-old would see their annual out-of-pocket costs more than double under this plan than under Medicare, over $6,000 in additional payments a year. Instead of working to control the surging health care costs, the Republican budget shifts them onto seniors and to families. The proposal also repeals the health care reforms that we passed last year, puts us back into the hands of insurance companies. I can say that because I am from Connecticut, which is the insurance capital of the world. It dismantles Medicaid and food stamps by turning them into block grants. The budget also provides $40 billion in subsidies to big oil companies, other special interests, providing billions to encourage corporations to take their jobs overseas, while cutting services to the most vulnerable Americans. In the first 10 years, the Ryan budget gets about 2/3 of its total cuts from programs serving low-income families, such as Medicaid, Pell Grants, WIC, food stamps, and biomedical research, by the way, also takes a large hit. Naturally, it cuts taxes for the wealthiest while raising taxes on the middle class. Billionaires get a lower top tax rate from 35% to 25%, an extended permanent estate tax giveaway. Everyone else sees valuable deductions and credits, like the child tax credit, eliminated. Nor does the budget do anything to reduce the deficit. By gutting the middle class, leaving seniors with health care bills, in other words, ripping up that social contract with seniors, this budget comes up with about $4.3 trillion in savings. But this does not go to reducing the deficit. Instead, almost all, $4.2 trillion, is offset by extending the Bush tax cuts permanently, including $800 billion in new tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. In short, the Ryan budget is Robin Hood in reverse. It takes from seniors, the middle class, and working families, and gives all of that money to the rich. It destroys the social safety net and thus fundamentally transforms the role of government. To pay for the giveaways and to oil companies and billionaires, the majority wants us to end Medicare, Medicaid, and food stamps. As I said, slash Pell funding, close the doors of opportunity for millions of Americans. What is it that our job is about? What is our job as elected representatives? What are our responsibilities as members of Congress? We are elected to provide opportunity. Our government is there to provide opportunity. Let me give you one example. Pell Grant funding. With David's leadership, our party worked hard to expand Pell Grant funding, keep those doors of opportunity open. It opened for every American. I am the daughter of an immigrant family whose family could only dare to dream that I would someday sit in the United States House of Representatives. And the road was through education and funding and scholarships and loans to be able to get me to school so I could realize my dreams. Under Chairman Obie, we passed the largest increase in college aid since the GI Bill. And as a result, 9 million students are now getting crucial Pell support to be able to go to school. Almost all of them could not afford college any other way. Yet, the Republican blueprint for 2012 calls for rolling back Pell funding to 2008 levels. That will mean slashing each grant by at least $500 and very likely more money. In fact, the 2012 budget takes $80 billion out of education and healthcare accounts. It is just taking money out of students' pockets. We should be encouraging students to be responsible, to work towards a college education. That is what David Obie did as chairman. I've tried to follow in his footsteps as ranking member, but I will tell you, the new Republican chairman of the Labor HHS Committee, David Obie's successor, actually called Pell Grants, and this is a quote, the welfare of the 21st century. Can you imagine? Some of my colleagues in the majority will go as far as characterizing providing college assistance as welfare. Oil company subsidies when gas is more than $4 a gallon? No. Corporate giveaways when billion-dollar companies like GE do not pay a penny in taxes? Oh, no. That is not welfare. You just think for a moment about what that reveals about our understanding of society and about their view of the role of government. What my parents and I share, what David Obie and his parents shared, is a fundamental set of values that government can create opportunity, that we can take out social insurance against misfortunes, and that we have intergenerational responsibilities. That is not welfare. That is good society. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle, or the new majority, or the newly elected members who have come to the Congress, do not seem to hold these values. And I believe theirs are the wrong choices for our country. Our basic values as a nation and our very future, those are the issues that are at stake. Understand what's happening today. It's not each program one by one. It's the totality of what they are trying to accomplish. A cause. A cause. All of these attempts by the majority to cut health care, services, basic protections back to the bone, and the assaults on the workers' rights taking place right here in Wisconsin. We know where all of this leads. Our nation lived it over a century ago during the Gilded Age. And because of the greed of that era, a generation of progressives like the Roosevelts and the La Follettes, Jane Addams, Frances Perkins, the first woman to serve in the cabinet, and FDR's Secretary of Labor, led us on a path to reform, a path that eventually led to the New Deal and the Great Society. People realize what Bob La Follette already knew. Our government has a vital role to play in ensuring the life, the health, the dignity of workers, of women and families. It has a moral obligation to help the most vulnerable and the least fortunate among us. That, in the words of FDR, and I quote, "The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, but it is whether we provide enough for those who have little." Like David, I've always felt that moral obligation deep in my bones. The reason why I came to the Congress in the first place. It's why I know he is so proud, and I am so proud that we were able to pass health care reform a year ago so that all Americans could get affordable health care. I wasn't there for Social Security or for Medicare or Medicaid, but I sure as hell am glad I was there. It's the reason why you go to the Congress, to be able to pass legislation like a health care bill so that you can help to transform people's lives. You know, I remember coming to the freshman orientation as a newly elected members of Congress 21 years ago. I had never run for office before, and I told this story on the floor of the House one evening. And I sat at the end of a long table, and I listened to the people come in and tell us what we needed to know about the United States Congress. I listened to one David Obey at the far end of the table from Wisconsin. And he spoke about the Appropriations Committee, and he spoke about the budget process, and he spoke about the Budget Committee. And I said to myself as I was listening, my God, what have I done? I am in so far over my head, I'm never going to make it. But I did make it, and in no small part, thanks to David. He's become one of my dearest friends and a mentor. Born and raised in a working-class family, he knows what the struggle is all about. He's walked in the shoes of the people of this country. And he knows, and he taught me, that Congress is an institution with the power and the potential to help ordinary people and to make opportunity real, to turn things around. That is why I take the threat posed by Walker and Ryan and their budgets very seriously. These budgets threaten to roll the clock back a century, to close the doors of educational opportunity, to strip working men and women of their basic rights and protections they have fought for over the years. The future of America is at stake, not just in Washington today, but right here in Wisconsin. It is at stake in Ohio, in Indiana, and in all the other states where American workers are right now, fighting against powerful interests for their basic rights. If we are going to hold on to that American dream, my hope is that you and I will be able to stand together. Thank you very, very much, and thank you for letting me do it here tonight. Thank you, David. Thank you.
I think you see why she's my favorite. Now we'll take a few questions or comments.
You just comment on the role of the military-industrial complex and the constant war that we seem to be involved in this whole process?
I would just say this to you. I think that what we need to try to do, and I was in Afghanistan not too long ago. I'll make a comment about military-industrial complex. We need to be out of Afghanistan. We cannot be there militarily. I think some of the work we are doing to, as I pointed out in terms of literacy, some of what we're doing about trying to establish a rule of law, some of the work and the training of law enforcement people, is the development that's happening on the ground. There's some good efforts, but we need to be there. I've been impressed that Gates has talked about wanting to cut back and that we ought to make defense cuts, but it is always a very, very big source of. We never get to do any oversight. We're doing oversight in our committee now in waste, fraud, and abuse, and the employment training programs. And NLRB and all these and some of these the healthcare programs, but we never seem to do any oversight in any of the defense industry programs, and the whole issue of the use of contractors and the way we've gone about that, and the billions and billions of dollars that have been spent without anyone looking at a bottom line or a balance sheet. And I have to listen to people tell me about someone who was going to get a lunch that maybe they didn't deserve as part of the school lunch program, when no one is bothering to take a look at the billions of dollars that are being made by contractors and privatizing and moving forward in that direction. It's an issue that ought to be on the table, and we ought to examine it very, very closely.
Are you satisfied with your working with, or Obama working with Congress, like on the military complex? Do you feel that there's enough communication in working with the president? And the other issue I was wondering about is, how do you think all the recalls in Wisconsin are going to affect our situation?
Let me answer the latter part of that effort, and as an outsider. I'm not just rooting from the outside. I'm prepared to send staff to come and to help and assist the recall elections. We have not had a moment like this. And I've said this, quite frankly, to all of my labor friends. I've said it writ large, including last night when I spoke to a labor group. Whatever problems you have, whatever difficulties you have, get over it. We have a moment. And it's critical. If you are successful electorally with these recall votes, the momentum that will provide nationally is incalculable. So I want you to be there, and I make that promise. You know, they'll be here to help in whatever needs to get done to do the grunt work. You're leading the country in this area at the moment. We need to follow where you want to go, and we need to help in any way that we that we can. We get it. You know, the communication from the president. I have to make one caveat about military. I am from Connecticut, and in my district, I represent Sikorsky, which makes helicopters, and Pratt & Whitney, which does engines. And I've flown in Black Hawk helicopters, most recently on my trip to Afghanistan, and we make the Black Hawk helicopter. If we make fewer, it's fine, but if we're going to make them, to be honest with you, I want them made in Stratford, Connecticut. So it's just parochial in that regard. The answer is yes, we get communication from the president. There's also communication through how we cast votes. And more and more, and David, you know the McGovern Amendment, which talks about just providing resources so that we can withdraw and withdraw in an orderly fashion. Every time it comes up, which is one of the advantages you have in the Congress, is you can keep bringing up things and they keep getting voting on. There are more and more votes to that, so that there is a mood in the Congress to cut back on our side anyway, resources for the war in Afghanistan. And I think people are going to hold the president to the July-August redeployment dates. And obviously with Iraq, we're trying to move out of Iraq and do that as more quickly. My view is that we ought to do it more quickly, but I will hold the president feet to the fire on a July and August sizable redeployment of troops out of Iraq, out of Afghanistan.
Along those lines.
Let me add 2 points. I have not been fully satisfied with the ability of the White House to communicate its message. I mean, I learned a long time ago in politics that what counts most is not the brilliance of your presentation, but how often you make it. Repetition is absolutely key, because just about the time that you say something for the 1,000th time and you're so sick of it you could gag, that's the first time that somebody has heard it. And so I've been unhappy with the White House's ability to follow up in driving home their message. But having said that, I think we need to understand that Obama is experiencing something that no president has experienced in my lifetime. I cannot recall a president in my lifetime who day after day after day had to literally take on as an adversary an entire news network like Fox. When I went to Congress, we had the fairness doctrine. So if a radio station carried an hour polemic from the left or the right, it had to be balanced by commentary from other sources on the political spectrum. Today, you get Rush Limbaugh in a 3-hour diatribe, and there's nothing that answers that. So I think Obama is operating at a huge disadvantage in comparison to any other president I've worked with. I would also say, with respect to the recall efforts, I am in awe of the courage and the determination of the Wisconsin State Senate 14. I was at the University of Wisconsin in Madison about a month ago, well, a little longer than that, and I was at a conference on education. Diane Ravitch was the speaker. And in the question and answer period, one of the grad students there said, well, I understand what you're saying, but after all, there isn't a dime's worth of difference between the political parties, blah, blah, blah. And I took the microphone and I said, for God's sake, if there's anybody in this room who believes, after what has happened in Wisconsin, if there's anybody in this room who believes that there isn't a dime's worth of difference between the political parties, say that to the State Senate 14. I mean, there is a hell of a difference. And anybody who says that there isn't these days doesn't have a clue about nothing. So I think that I detest the recall process. I don't like it at all. But we didn't start it. The Republicans started it by going after Jim Halperin. And so what has happened is that you have seen a retaliation on the part of the Democrats in the state Senate. Number one, because They had no choice. Since when in American politics are you required not to fight back? And secondly, when the governor and when the legislature supinely cooperates in supporting proposals that eviscerate the ability of anybody in the legislature to have any say about anything, since when shouldn't they fight back? So that's what we're doing through the recall process. And it ain't pretty, but I tell you, sometimes people need to understand that politics is not a morality play. Politics is a struggle for power to achieve ends. And some of those ends are constructive and some are not. And some of the techniques that are used are constructive and some are not. But, I mean, we cannot have unilateral disarmament in the political realm, and that's what this illustrates in Wisconsin. So the only way that you can fight back against Walker right now is to say to the legislators, and I know some of these guys. I know Luther Olson, for instance. He's a decent guy. I know he doesn't buy the stuff that the Republican leadership is peddling in the state Senate. I know that. But they get devoured by the hard right if they raise any kind of objection. So I think Wisconsin ought to be damn proud of those state senators.
I'll just make a comment. That's true about some of the colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the Congress. They're not supportive of a number of these initiatives, but they are frightened, and they won't do other than what they are told to do. They were immediately, personally, they're in danger of losing chairmanships. They will be, and so that they will not truly vote the way they believe that they ought to vote, or that the country needs them to vote for fear of retaliation. I would make one other point about the communication, because you asked particularly about defense. I think we did a bad job, and I say we, of either defining the health care bill. We didn't do it at all, and I fault the White House. I fault the Senate and the House. But when you're looking at initiatives of that heft, the stimulus bill, the health care bill, that needs the bully pulpit. So it's, and I think it was disastrous for us in not defining who we were and what those pieces of legislation were all about, and in terms of electorally.
Is that improving, that communication?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I thought the president's last speech was very good, very, very good. I quite frankly did not think the one prior to that, when they came to the compromise over the continuing resolution for 2011, where the commentary was about these are historic cuts. As somebody who had the responsibility, it was, I told you the 40% of the cuts that are coming in labor, health, and human services. In the final analysis, there were 24%, so it changed, but still was 24% of the cuts in programs that are vital. And I'm not afraid to look at how we need to. The issue of deficit reduction is about the choices you make and what direction you go and where do you start in that process. And there's a very big difference between us. But I was not happy with the speech that talked about those historic cuts. But I was pleased with the last speech.
You both have talked about the tremendous ideological difference between the Republicans and Democrats and the historical context of that. Are there any forces of globalization that are causing the rich and the corporations to really push this agenda so significantly the way they have? Or is it more of the history of the ideology and the beliefs that they have?
Well, I mean, what I tried to say in my introductory remarks is that this fight has been brewing a long, long time. I mean, the economic elite in this country in 1929 owned damn near everything. And after the stock market collapsed and the economy collapsed and the country was on its, on its heels, FDR saved capitalism by trying to build into the system tools that working people could use to defend their own economic interests. And FDR was regarded as a traitor to his own class. And so, as I said, when Eisenhower took over, there was a reason that the political right wing opposed Eisenhower in that 52 convention. They wanted Taft because they thought that Taft would give them a chance at repealing a lot of what FDR did. And they wanted it repealed for economic reasons, and they also wanted it repealed for ideological reasons. And so, now at long last, they think they've got a shot at doing it. They're not being forced to do this reluctantly because some globalization force. They want more money, and they want more power, and they don't want anybody. They want their uppity labor union guys to get back in the back row and quit telling them what ought to happen on the shop floor. They are true libertarians. And I mean, all you have to do is, I invite you to examine the public record of the Koch brothers and look at the number of times they've been sued by the Justice Department and other for all kinds of nefarious activities. And then you get an idea of what the hell would happen in this country if we had the kind of deregulation that they want. So, I mean, this is you had these 80 newcomers elected to the House, many of them Tea Party types, and they think that because they want to repeal the last half of the 20th century, that somehow there's something wrong with the other 80% of people in the House, and that they ought to be willing to do the same thing. And the fact that they're not has them befuddled and bamboozled and angry. And so poor John Boehner, who is at heart a reasonable man, understands that if he watch him on the debt ceiling, he will not be able to take a responsible position on that until the very last nanosecond, because if he does, his caucus will split right down the middle. And that is going to send all kinds of wrong signals out to the markets. It's going to make a hell of a lot of people nervous, and God forbid that we should ever default. I mean, it would provide market chaos. So, I mean, this is real stuff we're dealing with, and you've got a lot of these flat Earth guys. And what the other thing that bothers me about it is the immorality of it all, because you get a hell of a lot of these right-wing religious tub thumpers who prattle on every day about morality, but they manage to get behind the most anti-Christian economic program that it's on the block in anybody's pocket. And that's what I find so appalling and so frustrating. And that's what I think we have to take on.
Yeah, I just think it's, and I think I just agree with David 100%. I think Ryan characterized it. It's a cause. This is a cause. This is, the commentary last November was create jobs, turn the economy around, reduce the deficit. They have, just that's not what it's about. It's fundamentally changing government at its core, and David laid out the history, but they want to reverse that, and my hope is that they've overreached, and the public, that in fact those who voted, there's a woman who said in a Pennsylvania district where there was a newly elected Congressman, Mr. Barletta, about a week ago with regard to Medicare. She said, "You never told me you were going to vote to end Medicare when you asked me for my vote." So they're looking at this as a way to reverse it all. And it's very scary. You have to listen to 87 new people came, many of them Tea Party. Most have not had any legislative experience, any government experience. They have no, they don't believe in a role of government. They don't. You make it on your own. If you don't, that's your fault. They don't understand compromise, which is different from a number of the folks. I mean, David served a long time there, worked back and forth with people who agreed with him, disagreed with him, but you come to a conclusion. You come to a consensus. They don't believe it. It is you do what we want or we shut the government down. You do what we want or we will not vote to lift the debt ceiling. That is what we are dealing with every day. They do not believe in the institution of government as a means of change, and they don't believe in compromise.
Going back to the message, since the health care bill is still under attack, basically, I mean, they want to repeal it or to defund it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you not think that there should be more effort in promoting it and doing the positive things about it? And who should be doing that and how?
Well, I think individually we have to do it. I think so many members walked away from health care. One of the proudest votes I've cast was my vote on health care. And now we are in the business of retail, of trying to explain what it does. It should have been happening all along in that process. But what is happening, though, when you begin to see some of the implementation, which is already in effect, it's a much more difficult to talk about repealing of it. It's not going to get repealed. It can't. That was a bit of kabuki that they engaged in at the outset there, because while the House can't win a vote, the Senate and the President would veto it. But when you're seeing now families whose children can stay on their health care till age 26, that is important to them. Seniors, so many thousand in my state got the rebate check last year for prescription drugs. They're now going, as of January, to get physicals and wellness exams and screenings, and they're not having to copay. Small businesses are seeing that a third of their premium can get paid if they offer health care to their employees. So as some of the pieces are beginning to happen, there's less intensity about changing it. The view now is how do we make it better? How do we, which is what, if we had started earlier on this kind of an effort and messaging it correctly and communicating what was there and what were the benefits for people, for women, the unbelievable benefits for women in this health care bill. So it's reinforcing it. I think that the president still has to continue to talk about this. He's got to talk about the economic recovery. He's got to talk about, my view, he's got to tell the country who was responsible for the deficit. How did we get into this situation? But it's getting better, and I believe this Medicare piece also helps us a lot as well as to where they want to go, and we are doing a good job of talking about what they want to try to do there.
Welcome to Wisconsin.
Thank you.
My name is Al LaBelle. I'm from Marshfield, Wisconsin. But if I talk long enough, you'll realize I originally grew up in Massachusetts in a town called Southbridge, and I want to defend the great state of Connecticut as being an agricultural center.
Thank you very much.
Many of us grew up going to the Woodstock, Connecticut Fair and buying our milk from Osgood Farm, which is still there, I might add.
David, you see?
There are
I've been trying to
farms,
tell
there are
you
farms
guys.
in Connecticut.
Dairy farms, not as big as yours. Dairy farms.
Lots
we
of
do it.
corn. I just want to say that I want to second what you had just said a few minutes ago. I go every year and make Veterans Issues presentation up in Capitol Hill between the Longworth and the Rayburn Building and over to the Senate buildings. And I've got to tell you, there's 103 new members in Congress, 17 new members on the House VA committee. We spoke briefly about
Right.
veterans issues. And I can't begin to tell you, it was back to basics. It is so frightening to be sitting across from these people, and they're there for one thing and one thing only, and that's to score political points. They don't know how to govern. It's legislation 101. We had to explain to them why we were there. The president submits a budget, Congress reads it, and then seeks input, and that's why we're there. It is, you're looking at their eyes, they don't even want to learn. Chad Edwards was the subcommittee chairman on military construction and Veterans Affairs. We miss him greatly. His successor, the first words out of his mouth when we went in to talk to him was, "I hate the VA." And we asked him why, and it's because his Veterans Advisory Board, he's newly elected, had told him VA healthcare is terrible. And we had to start back at 101, VA healthcare 101. So everything you're saying, if you're sitting there dealing with these people, it's even worse.
But it's the tail wagging the dog at the moment.
The other thing I'm just wondering about, because I know we've sent, Congressman Ryan has had listening sessions, and there are a few veterans that are going. I talked to you, nothing is sacred with these people. We're next. You know, we met with the professional staff of the House Budget Committee, and they told us they're going to review the 1996 law that opened up VA health care to all veterans. And given the current climate, I don't think the conclusion is going to be, let's expand it. At the moment, they're talking about considering closing Category 7 and 8, which that's a euphemism for saying we're considering removing 1.3 million veterans from VA healthcare, which happens to be the #1 healthcare provider in the whole country. So we will be working on this, and I hope that you'll be siding with us on this
Forward to
issue.
working with you.
I just want to make one point. There are a lot of Republicans in the House who I think are very uneasy about the way this play is being written. And I think of people like Tom Petri. Tom Petri is a very conservative person, but he's a very constructive person. He served this state for years and has done, I think, a reasonably good job in the Congress. But here's a guy, essentially a moderate, who twice now has been passed over for committee chairmanships because his own leadership thinks that he simply gets along too well with Democrats. He was supposed to be the new chairman of the Transportation Subcommittee a few years ago when Dennis Hastert was still the speaker. And Hastert walked into the steering committee room and essentially blocked it by saying that Petri got along too well with Jim Oberstar, who was the Democratic chairman of the committee. You know, we used to prize the ability of people on the other side of the aisle to get along with each other, because that's the way you get things done that survive. But I mean, there are a lot of Republicans who I think are very uneasy, and I know sooner or later they're going to go to Boehner and start a counter pressure. It's just a question of when they do it. And that is going to be determined largely by how disciplined and how effective and how clear the Democratic response is to what's going on now. And I think that Ryan has given us an opportunity to remind people of what our social responsibilities are. And you have, right now, the #1 philosopher in terms of popularity in the House with the new members is Ayn Rand. That's all you got to know.
Right.
You know, the only thing I would say about the White House's communication skills is it drove me nuts to watch the White House get pounded on Obama's birth certificate. If I had been Obama, I would have simply said, well, you know, Mr. Trump may question whether I was born in this country or not. My only question is whether Mr. Trump was born on this planet or not. I mean, there's certain times when simple humor or ridicule will serve better than a learned treatise on some subject, and I think this is one of them. I think we should have laughed them to death on this. But, you know, even the liberal news networks, like MSNBC, they took this stuff seriously, and they trumpeted it night after night. I mean, it's just one of the prices you pay for the fact that sometimes society gets silly. Anyway, it is time for us to bring this to a halt. I do want to thank everybody for coming. I appreciate it, and I hope you've enjoyed Rosa being with us. I know I certainly did.
Thank you.